Morning, Year 7. The next lesson in the series on the slave trade is around about what happened in the Middle Passage. So if you just jot the key learning question down in your books, or if you're working on computer or paper, do the same. It's about the Middle Passage, which we're just going to describe in a bit when we look again at the triangle itself. Okay, so we're looking at conditions in the Middle Passage. So, last lesson we looked at this section here. We looked at that section just there, if you see my cursor, where Europeans are travelling to this coast of Africa and taking guns and swords that they are producing in factories during their industrial revolutions to the African kings on this coastline here, who are using those guns and swords to actually fight and try and win land against other tribal leaders. Now, obviously, that's the first part of a triangle. The second part is across here, okay, where they are travelling on the ships to this area called the Caribbean. And in the Caribbean, they are working on these islands and on farms on these islands in really hot climates to produce things like cotton, sugar, coffee, tobacco, which are then sent back to Europe. So it's a triangle, but obviously they're under really harsh conditions here, and their owners of them, okay, are the plantation owners and the farmers, and they control them and use them as slaves. Okay, so that's the first part, and this is the next part, which we're looking at today. This journey on the ships and how these European sailors are trying to cram in as many slaves as possible to take them across to each island and then auction them off like cattle. So that's the first part there, which we spoke about with guns and swords, and this is just another little overview. Now, you haven't got, I would hand out a little picture where you would actually annotate your diagram. So you can simply just draw a triangle in your book and put Britain at one side, Africa at the right hand side, and then West Indies on the left, or the Caribbean on the left. And I'm just going to talk this through so you can actually annotate your triangle as we're doing it, and press pause whenever you want to. So the white Europeans sailed to Africa with the manufactured goods like swords and guns and traded them here for slaves. So the leaders gave them slaves in return for the guns and the swords. The reasons we know they wanted the guns and swords were to fight internal battles against other tribal leaders. Then we had the actual slaves being put onto the ships and taken across to the Caribbean here. Okay, conditions there were really bad. Obviously they made it across to the Caribbean, but some on the way on this Middle Passage did die due to disease, due to the fact it's taking kind of 30, 40, 50 days to get across because the boats are so slow, the ships are so slow, and many are not being fed very well, so some do die on the way, which is not nice. And obviously here, when they get to the plantations, they're sold off. But that's the first part there. Europeans sailed to Africa with the guns and swords, the manufactured goods, and trade them like a trade deal for slaves. That's the first part. The second part is they are then taken from here, okay, across to the West Indies or the Caribbean. Okay, so there are two names for this area of land, which is made up of the small islands like Jamaica, Bermuda and Barbados. They're all kind of around here. And there they are sold and forced, like we know what slavery means, to force someone to work against their will, to work on large farms called plantations to help grow crops and pick crops. And those crops of things like sugar and tobacco can't be grown in Europe, so they want these. So that's the journey there we're looking at today, that Middle Passage, which takes time. And then finally, we have the third part where the actual traders load up the ships here with all the luxury goods like the tobacco and the coffee and the sugar that are grown on the plantations, and all the spices, and they sail them back to Europe and to Britain for the rich. So that is the triangle that you're going to be pressing pause and making notes to, so you really understand what the slave trade triangle is. Now, I'm just going to show you a video which just gives you a bit more information about this section here, and that's the main aim of the lesson, is to look at this journey between Africa and the Americas, or the West Indies or the Caribbean. And it's called the middle stage, the Middle Passage, because it's the centre of the triangle. And what I'd like us to do is just take a look at what conditions were like for the slaves after their kidnapping from the native country, because the conditions here are horrific, and they're not good at all. So like I said, not many do actually end up surviving and getting across for auction. Some actually do, unfortunately, die on the way. So I'm just going to show you a little clip around the Middle Passage, and what I would suggest, rather than writing down any questions, I would just suggest that you put a side title, The Middle Passage, and just try and pick up 3 or 4 key adjectives and points to describe what the conditions were like on this Middle Passage. Okay, so hopefully you can see it. I know there's a bit of glare on the screen just there. I'll try and bring it forward a little bit, see if it makes any difference. Not much, okay, but hopefully you can hear it too. So point 1 there, you can see talking in their native tongue, but disgusting, because leaders of their own tribe are taking this man away from his family, who you saw before, capturing him into the net and taking him to the coast. You can see the sand here, so they're taking him to the coast so they can do the trade deal with the European sailors. As you can see here, there are quite a lot of slaves that are now being tied together, okay? And on the right hand side you can see the kind of white European owners who are giving some of the tribal leaders guns and swords from cases in exchange for these slaves, like we explained before. Not nice. You even saw a man there pleading with one of his friends who was working with the tribal leader to not let him go and not sell him. But they're all now being paraded down to the ships and loaded onto the ships in a disgusting manner, and the exchange of the guns and swords is happening here. That's the tribal leader. So there they were just being kind of taken across on boats to get onto the ships, and this scene now is not nice. You will see the slaves actually being cramped and tightly compact underneath the ship in terms of loading them across to the Caribbean, and they're being fed here, but not in a nice way. You might not be able to see there, but there are women, babies, children on that Middle Passage who are really, really struggling. They're being tied together, and there's obviously a lot of wind and waves outside, so it's awful conditions for them there. I'm just going to fast forward it to here, where the guy is talking to them in Portuguese. He is feeding them one of the sailors' pottage here, which is kind of thicker porridge to try and keep them going, but in a not very nice way. He's deciding to feed the strong but not feed the weak, because he thinks they'll get more money for the strong at auction in the Caribbean.
Esta no.
can see they're fighting over food, which is not nice again at all. It's interesting learning about this now with what happened this weekend and the statue of a slave trader who would have been one of these white guys being toppled in Bristol. And that's a particular slave trader who had given a lot of money to the city of Bristol and left a lot of money. But you can understand why some people may have removed that statue, although I believe they potentially should have done it in a more democratic way, in a fair way, and there should have been a vote for it. You can see that actually, if you look at Black British heritage that are coming from the Caribbean and Africa, there's a lot of slavery that has happened. This is 300 to 400 years ago, but you can understand a lot of the unrest, even though obviously the protesting is in mass is a bad idea because it's going against social distancing, so it's stupid. But you can understand why there are some people that are unhappy with that. But those are conditions on the Middle Passage just there that I wanted to show you. So you've got an idea. It's not nice, and they eventually land and they arrive in the Caribbean just here, and they get put up for auction. The main task that I want you to do today, guys, is, as the video shows, the Middle Passage was a horrific experience for the slaves. On Show My Homework, I'm going to attach the sources you're going to need, and I just want you to choose one of the following topics here and use the sources to create a mind map on what the Middle Passage was actually like for slaves. So conditions on there, treatment by their captors, by the people that captured them, the ship itself, or actually resistance, and that word means, did the slaves resist and did they fight back? So these are the sources that I'm going to attach onto Show My Homework, just so I can go through them quickly with you now. You can see a bird's eye view of the ship and how tightly compact people were. Again, there you can see how tightly compact they were, so that would help you with that question in terms of the ship itself. You can also see just there, okay, that you've got an etching of the slaves, a drawing of the slaves who were sick and being thrown overboard, so that the actual treatment of them is disgusting at the time. You've also got a scene from inside the slave ship itself, where you have slaves being tied together, and it's not very nice at all underneath there in terms of how they're being treated. You can tell the conditions are poor. Another painting of some resistance and them trying to fight back there, which I'll let you have a look at in more detail. A nice, a source here from a surgeon which gives you disgusting detail, but what it's actually potentially like on these ships and the arguments between the slaves and the owners. And then obviously an ex-slave trader as well, who makes an honest assumption there as to what it was like. A neck shackle, which was used to punish slaves. So all of these you can work through. Slave being cleaned down before auction in a disgusting way. So you can take a look at these. It's not nice how they are being treated, and I'll put these on Show My Homework to help you with your little activity there that I want you to do. Okay, so they're going to go up on Show My Homework. Once you've finished that, just take a minute to have a look at the plenary, which is here, and you should be able to do a really mini newspaper report now based on what you've learned from that research, and just send that through to me. Because I'm filming this lesson, you can do this activity at any time before Wednesday, because that's when the next one will come in our normal lesson. But giving you a little bit of an idea around what success criteria you could use to write that newspaper report. But have a good go. I'll put the link to this video now, obviously, on to Show My Homework, and then obviously the sources next to it. And just give me a smiley face or a thumbs up, or send me a picture of the work that you've done on Show My Homework to say you've completed it, so I can keep up to date and see where you're up to. And we'll touch base again on Wednesday. Okay, Year 7, have a good day. Bye.